Paul was caught up to the third heaven, saw paradise, heard words that no human being has permission to speak. And when he returned to earth, God allowed a messenger of Satan to torment him. Why? What was this thorn in the flesh that not even 3 desperate pleas could remove? The answer will disturb everything you believe about Christian suffering. Shalom, truth seekers. This is Hidden Mysteries of the Bible. Today, we're going to unravel one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of Scripture, the Apostle Paul's thorn in the flesh. For 2,000 years, theologians, pastors, and scholars have debated, what was this? And why did God, who healed multitudes through Paul, refuse to heal him? 2 Corinthians 12:7-9. Paul writes, "And lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing I pleaded with the Lord 3 times, that it might depart from me. And he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." Let's analyze every Greek word here, because what gets lost in translation is absolutely crucial. The word for thorn is skolops. This isn't a splinter, it's a stake, a spear, something large, sharp, piercing. This wasn't a minor annoyance, this was something brutal. Was given to me, edote-moi, past tense, passive voice. Someone gave this to Paul. It didn't happen by chance. It was deliberately granted. By whom? Keep reading. A messenger of Satan, angelos satana. The Greek word angelos literally means angel or messenger. It's not a metaphor. It's not symbolic. Paul is saying that a demonic angelic being was assigned to him, a literal agent of Satan with a specific mission, to buffet him. To buffet me. Qualifies. This word means to beat repeatedly, to punch, to strike with fists. Present continuous tense in Greek. It wasn't a one-time attack. It was constant, repetitive, relentless, day after day, punch after punch, incessant spiritual beating. Now here's where it gets disturbing. Paul says this was given to him. The passive voice implies that God permitted it. More than that, God granted it, just like Job 1:12, where God says to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your power." Divine permission for satanic torment. But why? Paul answers, "Lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations." He had just been caught up to the third heaven, saw things no Old Testament prophet saw, heard words that are forbidden to be spoken. He was at risk of extreme spiritual pride. Think about it. Paul saw more of heaven than Moses, more than Elijah, more than Isaiah. He went to the third heaven, to the throne itself. If any human being had reason to be spiritually exalted, it was Paul, and God knew it. So God did something radical. He handed Paul over to a messenger of Satan, an assigned demon, an agent of darkness with a divine mission. Keep Paul humble. Now comes the 2,000-year question. What was this thorn? Paul never specifies. And this silence has generated 7 main theories throughout church history. Let's examine each one biblically. Theory 1. It was a physical disease, specifically ophthalmia, a serious eye disease. The evidence? Galatians 4:13-15. Paul writes to the Galatians, "You know that because of physical infirmity I preached the gospel to you at the first, and my trial which was in my flesh you did not despise or reject. For I bear you witness that, if possible, you would have plucked out your own eyes and given them to me." Pluck out your own eyes to give to Paul? This suggests Paul had something seriously wrong with his eyes. Some scholars point to Acts 9, the conversion on the road to Damascus, a light from heaven brighter than the sun. Acts 9:8-9 says Paul was 3 days blind, and Acts 9:18 says there fell from his eyes something like scales. Permanent eye damage? Possibly. Galatians 6:11, "See with what large letters I have written to you with my own hand." Why large letters? Because he could barely see. The theory has biblical merit. Theory 2, it was chronic malaria or epilepsy. Galatians 4:13 mentions physical infirmity. The Greek word asthenia can mean debilitating physical illness. Paul was frequently in swampy regions, Asia Minor, Mediterranean coast, endemic malaria areas, recurring attacks of fever, chills, extreme weakness. This would fit with Thorn, something that pierces repeatedly. As for epilepsy, some point to Paul's experience in the third heaven, 2 Corinthians 12:2. Whether in the body I do not know, or whether out of the body I do not know. Paul was confused about his physical state. Does this sound like an epileptic episode? Debatable. But historically, epilepsy was viewed as demonic possession. Could messenger of Satan be Paul's way of describing epileptic seizures? Theory 3, and here it gets dark. It was a literal demon, not a disease, not a metaphor. A real demonic being assigned to torment Paul physically and spiritually. Let's look at the language again. Angelos Satana, angel of Satan. To buffet me, qualifies. Physical beating. Is there biblical precedent? Absolutely. Job 2.7. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Direct physical affliction from Satan with God's permission. Luke 13:11-16, a woman who had a spirit of infirmity 18 years. Jesus says, Satan has bound her. Demon-caused illness. If Paul had an assigned demon, this explains why he prayed 3 times for it to be removed. You don't pray against malaria, you take quinine. You don't pray against vision problems, you seek treatment, but you pray against demonic oppression, you cry out for deliverance. And here's what's chilling. God said no. 3 times Paul pleaded. 3 times God refused. Why? Because that demon was fulfilling a divine purpose, keeping the most powerful apostle in history humble. Theory 4, it was constant persecution. Every time Paul preached, violent opposition arose, beaten with rods 5 times, stoned, and left for dead. Shipwrecked 3 times, betrayed by false brothers. 2 Corinthians 11:23-28 lists his sufferings. It's brutal to read. Messenger of Satan could refer to the human agents of Satan, the Judaizers who persecuted him from city to city, the religious people who incited mobs against him. This was constant, relentless, a thorn that never stopped piercing. Theory 5, extremely controversial. It was sexual temptation. 1 Corinthians 7:9, Paul writes, For I wish that all men were even as I myself, but I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am, but if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry. Paul was single, celibate, but he acknowledges this is difficult. Thorn in the flesh, sarx in Greek, flesh. The New Testament frequently uses flesh to refer to carnal desires, sexual temptations. Romans 7:18, For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, nothing good dwells. Galatians 5:19, Now the works of the flesh are evident, adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness. Could Paul be struggling with constant sexual temptation? A burning desire that he prayed repeatedly to be removed? And God saying, My grace is sufficient, you'll learn self-control through this battle. It's possible, but speculative. Theory 6. It was a specific person, Alexander the coppersmith. 2 Timothy 4:14-15, Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. May the Lord repay him according to his works. You also must beware of him, for he has greatly resisted our words. This man persecuted Paul relentlessly, resisted his teaching, caused much harm. Could he be the messenger of Satan, a demonic human agent assigned to torment Paul wherever he went? Some scholars believe so, a human thorn, a person who pierced his life repeatedly. Theory 7. It was the very weight of the revelations. Paul saw too much, knew too much, carried revelations he couldn't share. 2 Corinthians 12:4. He heard inexpressible words, which it is not lawful for a man to utter. Imagine carrying knowledge of the third heaven that you're forbidden to reveal, the psychological torment, the spiritual frustration. This could generate what we now call depression, anxiety, mental torment. The thorn was the crushing weight of inexpressible revelations, and 3 times he prayed, "God, let me forget. Take this knowledge from me, it's too heavy." And God said, "No, my grace is sufficient." So which theory is correct? Here's the brutal truth. We don't know. And maybe that's intentional, because if Paul had specified, "My thorn was malaria," then only people with malaria would identify. If he said it was sexual temptation, only people struggling with lust would apply. But because Paul remains mysteriously vague, everyone can identify. Do you have a thorn? I do. We all do. That one thing you pray repeatedly for God to remove, and he doesn't remove it. That demon God allows to torment you. That sickness that won't heal. That temptation that won't go away. That person who won't leave your life. And you cry out, "God, why? You healed others. Why not me? You delivered others. Why not me?" And God's answer is the same he gave Paul. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." Let's break down God's response. My grace is sufficient for you. Arche soa hecharis mu. The word arche means is enough, is adequate, is sufficient. Not abundant, not excessive, just enough. God is saying, you'll have exactly the grace you need, no more, no less, just enough for each day. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Higar dynamis en astenea teleitai. The word teleitai means is completed, is perfected, reaches its goal. God's power isn't demonstrated when you're strong. It's demonstrated when you're weak, when you're broken, when you're at the end of yourself. That's when God's glory shines brightest. That's why Paul responds in 2 Corinthians 12:9-10, "Therefore most gladly I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For when I am weak, then I am strong." This is madness to the natural mind. Weakness is strength? Yes, because your weakness creates space for God's power. Now see Paul's trajectory. In Philippians, written years later, he says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." 4:13. This verse is in the context of the thorn. Paul learned that Christ's strength is released through his weakness. The thorn remained, but grace increased, power was perfected. Here's what the Prosperity Church doesn't want you to know. God frequently says no to your prayers. And it's not because you don't have enough faith. It's not because there's hidden sin. It's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because God has a greater purpose for your weakness than for your strength. Paul healed the sick, raised the dead, cast out demons, but couldn't heal himself. Why? Because a healed Paul would be a proud Paul. A Paul without a thorn would be a Paul without dependence, and a Paul without dependence would be a Paul without power. See the biblical pattern. Moses had a speech impediment, Exodus 4:10. God said, "Who has made man's mouth?" and then used that weakness. Jeremiah was too young, Jeremiah 1:6. God said, "Do not say, I am a youth," and then sent him. Gideon was the least of the least family, Judges 6:15. God said, "Go in this might of yours," the might of weakness. David was a shepherd boy. Peter was impulsive. Thomas doubted. All had thorns. And God used each thorn to magnify his glory. Because when a weak man does powerful things, it's obvious it's not the man. It's God. So what's your thorn? Maybe it's chronic illness. Maybe it's an assigned demon. Maybe it's a toxic person God won't remove from your life. Maybe it's persistent temptation. Maybe it's past trauma that won't completely heal. Maybe it's physical limitation. Maybe it's financial circumstance. Maybe it's loneliness. And you've already prayed once, twice, 3 times, 10 times, 100 times. God, remove this, and he hasn't removed it. And you're confused, frustrated, even angry. God, why do you heal others but not me? Why do you deliver others but not me? Here's the answer you need to hear. Maybe God loves you too much to remove your thorn, because he knows that without that thorn, you'd become exalted. You'd drift away. You'd trust yourself instead of him. The thorn is his mercy disguised as torment. Paul ends by saying, "Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake." I take pleasure. Not resignation, not bitter tolerance, pleasure, because he understood the thorn isn't punishment, it's a gift. Here's the final revelation, and pay attention. The thorn proves you've seen the third heaven. Paul received the thorn because he had extraordinary revelations. If you have a persistent thorn that God refuses to remove, it may be because God has shown you things others haven't seen, revealed truths to you others don't know, and that thorn keeps you dependent, humble, broken, useful. Without the thorn, Paul would have been disqualified by pride. With the thorn, he wrote half the New Testament, planted churches on 3 continents, and turned the world upside down. The thorn didn't stop him. The thorn enabled him, because it forced total dependence on Christ. So stop praying only for the thorn to be removed. Start praying, "God, if you want me to carry this, then give me sufficient grace. Perfect your power in my weakness. Use my thorn for your glory." And watch how God transforms your greatest torment into your greatest testimony. The truth no one wants to hear, but everyone needs. God isn't as interested in your comfort as he is in his glory. And sometimes, often, his glory is more manifested through your weakness than through your strength. The thorn remains, but grace increases, and power is perfected. If this video confronted you with an uncomfortable truth, share it with someone who's praying for the 3rd, 10th, 100th time for something God isn't removing. Maybe they need to hear, "My grace is sufficient." Subscribe, because the hardest truths are still to come. Until the next revelation, Shalom.